It is May of 2004. A lawyer in Minneapolis slides a contract across a conference table, and with one signature, a town of 1,100 people stops belonging to itself. Brunswick Corporation, an Illinois giant built on bowling alleys and billiard tables, hands over $191 million in cash, with up to $30 million more waiting on the other side of performance targets. In exchange, it takes 4 factories and 3 brands. One of those brands is the reason the town exists at all. That brand built more than 10,000 boats a year out of a 250,000 square foot plant in New York Mills, Minnesota. It employed more people than anything else in that town by a wide margin. It had a name that anglers across 2 countries said the way other people say a trusted friend's name. And the man who started it built the first one because he simply couldn't find a duck boat worth hunting out of. Everything that followed, the factories, the fame, the buyout, traces back to a welder with a torch and a grudge against bad boats. That man is Howard Lund. And this is how his name ended up on a spreadsheet in Lake Forest, Illinois. Walk any dealer lot in the Midwest today, and you'll still hear his last name spoken like a verdict. That's a Lund, said the way you describe a truck that starts in January or a knife that never dulls. The brand outlived the man by decades, outlived his son's ownership, outlived the very idea of a family running it. What it never lost through every ownership change was the thing Howard built into the first hull in 1947, the assumption that the boat should outlast the person who bought it. Howard Lund is born on August 7, 1912, in the small town of Gary, Minnesota. His family moves to New York Mills while he's still a boy, and that town will claim him for the rest of his life. He finishes high school in 1930, heads to the Dunwoody Institute in Minneapolis to study mechanical drafting and fabrication, and starts learning the 2 skills that will define everything he builds afterward: how to draw a thing precisely and how to make metal obey it. His first boat comes in 1939, welded out of galvanized steel in Albert Lea. Crude by his own account. But it floats, and it's his, and that's enough to hook him. The war interrupts everything, the way it interrupted everyone's plans in those years. From 1940 to 1946, Lund works at the Mare Island Navy Shipyard in Vallejo, California, building submarines and warships for a country that needs both, fast. 6 years around naval-grade steel and precision fabrication, an education no boat-building school could have given him. He comes home to New York Mills and opens a sheet metal shop and a furnace dealership. Ordinary work. The kind of thing a returning veteran does to pay rent. But in 1947, ahead of duck season, he can't find a hunting boat that doesn't disappoint him, so he builds his own out of aluminum in that same shop. He straps it to the roof of his car and drives around town with it sitting up there like a trophy, because he's proud of it, and he has every right to be. A salesman for Inland Marine Corporation sees it parked outside, asks if Lund can build more. Lund says yes. The salesman writes an order for 50 duck boats on the spot. That's the whole founding story. No investors, no business plan, no market research. A stubborn duck hunter, a sheet metal shop, and one salesman with good eyes. In 1948, the order becomes a company. The Lund Boat Company opens for business in New York Mills. Population barely 1,000, and it never leaves. It's worth sitting with how small that beginning actually is. No garage full of prototypes, no years of tinkering toward a grand vision. One man solves one personal annoyance, and a stranger happens to be standing there when he does. Half the great manufacturing names in American history start this way, not with ambition, but with irritation. Somebody gets tired of a bad product and decides, almost as a side project, to make their own. Howard Lund just happened to be tired of a bad duck boat. The 1950s belonged to expansion. By 1950, Lund is producing aluminum hunting boats, and soon after 12 and 14-foot fishing boats. Post-war America is buying cars, buying homes, buying leisure, and boats are part of that wave. Models like the Water King, the Water Queen, and the Water Princess build Lund's name into something durable. By the mid-1950s, the shop has grown to around 15 employees, small by later standards, but already the largest thing happening in New York Mills. Howard doesn't stay in sole command forever. As the company scales through the following decades, his sons step into leadership. the family business becoming, in the truest sense, a family business. And the town grows with it. Every new hire, every new model, ties another household in New York Mills to the fortunes of one aluminum boat factory. In 1959, Lund expands into a larger facility to keep pace with orders. In 1968, the company acquires Shell, Lake Boat Company, and adds fiberglass to its capabilities for the first time, broadening what a Lund can even mean. In 1972, a second plant opens across the border in Steinbach, Manitoba, chasing Canadian demand that the Minnesota factory alone can't satisfy. Then, in 1978, two things happen that have nothing to do with each other on paper and everything to do with each other in hindsight. The first is the Mr. Pike, a 16-foot fishing boat that changes what a production aluminum boat is allowed to be. Casting platforms, pedestal seating, a built-in live well. It sounds ordinary now because every serious fishing boat copied it afterward. In 1978, it's a genuine leap, and it turns Lund from a maker of solid, honest boats into a maker of the boats serious anglers actually want. The second is quieter, and it happens hundreds of miles away in a different industry entirely. A Minneapolis investor named Irwin Jacobs buys a 25% controlling stake in Arctic Enterprises, a snowmobile manufacturer that, almost as an afterthought, also owns the Larson and Lund boat lines. Jacobs isn't a boatman. He's a deal maker, the kind of investor who buys distressed companies, restructures them, and moves on. Arctic Enterprises goes bankrupt within a few years under the weight of a couple of low snow winters and high interest rates. Jacobs sells off the snowmobiles, keeps the boats, and renames what's left Minstar, the company that will eventually become Genmar Holdings. Lund doesn't know it yet, but its independence effectively ended the moment that stock transferred. It just takes a couple of decades for anyone outside a boardroom to notice. Under Genmar, Lund keeps building. That's the strange part of this story. The loss of independence doesn't look like decline from the outside. It looks like growth. Genmar assembles an entire portfolio of boat brands under Jacobs' control: Crestliner, Lowe, Ranger, Larson, Glastron, more than a dozen names eventually. And Lund becomes the crown jewel of the aluminum side of that empire. In 1999, as the company marks 50 years since Howard's first duck boat, Lund's engineers unveil the IPS hull, a reverse chime and pad design that transforms how an aluminum boat rides and handles. It isn't a small tweak. It's the kind of innovation that resets the standard for the entire industry. Anglers who spent decades getting pounded by chop suddenly have a boat that manages it. The Sport Track storage system follows in 2003, letting owners customize their boats to their own fishing style. By the start of 2004, Lund is producing more than 10,000 boats a year out of New York Mills alone, with another 2,000 rolling out of Steinbach. 70 models ranging from 14 feet to 21.5. 352 dealers across North America carry the brand. Combined with sister brands Crestliner and Lowe, sales for the fiscal year ending June 2003 total $311 million. It is by any measure the strongest Lund has ever been, which is exactly the moment Irwin Jacobs decides to sell. Genmar's decision isn't about Lund failing, it's about Genmar restructuring. The company spins off its VEC composite molding technology into a standalone business and looks to shed weight elsewhere, and three aluminum brands, Crestliner, Lowe, and Lund, become the next piece to move. Brunswick Corporation is waiting. Brunswick already owns names like Boston Whaler and Sea Ray, and its boat group president, Dustin McCoy, describes the acquisition in 5 words: filling in the white space. Brunswick doesn't make aluminum fishing boats at Lund's level. Now it does. The deal closes for $191 million in cash, with up to $30 million in additional earnout tied to performance. 4 factories change hands in a single signature: New York Mills, Steinbach, the Crestliner plant in Little Falls, the Lowe plant in Lebanon, Missouri. McCoy calls it the acquisition that makes Brunswick the largest boat builder in the world by both dollar sales and units. For Brunswick, it's a milestone. For New York Mills, it's the day the town's largest employer stops being Minnesotan and starts being a line item in an Illinois conglomerate's annual report. Howard Lund doesn't live to see the sale. He dies in October of 2003 at 91 years old, just months before the deal is announced. In a strange way, the timing spares him from watching a company built on his stubbornness about duck boats become a subsidiary of a company built on bowling alleys. Here's what makes the Lund story different from most brand buyouts. It isn't a story of decline. Under Brunswick, Lund keeps its factory in New York Mills. It keeps its reputation for durability. It keeps innovating. The impact and crossover lines arrive in the early 2000s, expanding the brand from hardcore tournament fishing into family recreation. And Lund remains, by most anglers' accounts, the standard the rest of the aluminum boat industry still measures itself against. But something did end in that conference room in 2004, even if nobody could point to it on a balance sheet. The line from a welder proud enough of his duck boat to strap it to his car roof, through sons who inherited a family business, to a company that answers to shareholders 800 miles away, that line broke. What's left is still excellent, still built in the same town, on the same principles Howard insisted on from the beginning. But it isn't his anymore, and it hasn't been for a long time. It just took the rest of us until 2004 to read the paperwork. Every Lund that leaves that New York Mills plant today still carries a version of Howard's original promise, a boat tough enough to trust your life to on cold water, built by people who've spent decades proving they mean it. What changed is who signs the checks. And maybe that's the real lesson sitting under this whole story. The things we trust most are rarely still owned by the people who first earned that trust. We just keep buying the boat because the boat still works.